Hi again, welcome to Nišville Jazz International Festival channel. And I have enormous pleasure, at least for me, enormous pleasure to welcome Birch from Stereo MCs, one of the bands that I was like growing up with. So Rob, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me for this interview. And I will have some questions that I personally want to know, of course, and I would like our audience to know more about what was going on. So basically, just to put in perspective, you started somewhere by the end of the 80s, you've exploded in the 1992 with your album, and then there was a huge pause, huge hiatus, about a decade or so. Most of the bands, most of the artists will grab that opportunity, meaning, yeah, we finally made it, we're now going to. And you did quite the opposite. You keep your artistic integrity, you've moved away from that in a sort of way when you return back. But how was all that thing going in the 90s and the return and so on?
It's not a simple question to answer, but I can't actually always put my finger on it and understand why. But I just think that we're human beings, and it was our third album in quite quick succession, and I feel life is a bit like it's all about energy. You know, it's waves of energy. And I think we rode a very steep curve of energy, and it was a bit of a long way to come down. And my own personal feelings about it were we were on the road after we released Connected in 1992. We were on the road for probably about 18 months. We didn't see much of home. And so inevitably your sort of personal life ends up falling apart a bit, and you have to put it back together when you get home, or attempt to. It doesn't always work, and that also points at your creative output, because in those days we didn't have computers and we didn't have the means to make music whilst you're out on the tour. So you get home and you have to get back into a groove again. And what I personally felt was that in the making of that third album, it felt like my whole life experience was in there. It was, it represented so much of everything that I'd experienced in life. And all I can think is, we went back in the studio when we came back off the road, but we just weren't finishing tracks. We're doing a lot of beats and stuff like that, but we just weren't finishing tracks with vocals on them. And I can only put it down to the fact that we just had to get a bit more life inside us and a bit more energy. And it took us about, well, probably 6 or 7 years to get the ball rolling. We did a lot of mixes in between then, and we did a DJ Kicks album, and we started a label. I mean, it was frustrating. It wasn't like we just went off to Costa del Sol and put our feet up. It was like we stayed in London and sort of banged our heads on a brick wall for a while, just going, "Why isn't this working?" Uh, it was it was very depressing, to be honest with you. I, for a musician to not feel like the creative things are really turning properly inside you, it's very depressing, and so it was a very difficult time. But every life has its ups and downs, and doing what I do is a great life. I've got to say, I'm enormously thankful for being a musician and for having been given this life. So I have to accept that sometimes it's going to be difficult, and sometimes you're going to have to do things that aren't easy. Uh, and then other times it just feels ridiculously easy. That's music. There's no formula that I can find for it.
When you return to, studio and creating new albums at the beginning of the millennia, you've managed to do one amazing thing. You've managed to keep yourselves that you can immediately recognize that stereo MCs. But at the same time, it was a different groove. It was a different approach. It was the whole atmosphere sounded different. And yet
Yeah.
it was just like remarkably understandable that that's stereo MCs. So what caused you to make that shift?
I don't think we really thought about it and thought we didn't plan to make a shift. Like I say, I think records represent where you are at in life. And I think Deep Down and Dirty was a darker record. It represented I mean, Deep Down and Dirty was the first track to be finished. And I think it represented coming out of a dark time, a dark time personally and struggling and fighting to get back to where you want to be. And it represented that sort of warrior element that you're going to fight for what you want and what you think is right. Uh, I mean, the fact that it still sounded like stereo MCs sort of worked for us and it worked against us because a lot of critics were like, well, this is nothing new. They're not pushing the boundaries or anything like that. So we did get quite a lot of negativity with that record, but to be honest, I try not to read press. I always made it a little rule. Don't read press, don't read it. It's not why you do it. It's not, I'm not in competition here. I'm just here to put out what I can put out as a vessel.
Quite distinctive for stereo MCs, even back in the 90s and in the millennia, is that your stage performance, your live shows are backed up with the band, with musicians. A lot of bands of that type, sort of way, were just backed up by DJs, electronics, and so on. You were always going the harder way, meaning you really presented the full show when playing. And that was something that, made a distinction between you and the other bands. And you kept doing it that way, while others were just trying to, match what you do. How do you feel about that pioneering the way that you presented your music in that way?
I try not to look at life like we're pioneers or anything like that, because I don't really, I just think that we're part of a puzzle or we're part of a tree, and it's inevitable we're going to follow from what's gone before us. And there were other bands with drummers at the time when we first started out in 1987, when we released our first record. We just looked at things and thought, you know, at that time we were considered a hip hop group, a rap group. Although really we weren't a purist rap group, we weren't. Uh, but we looked at the situation and we went to see live rap bands playing, and they always got put into clubs that didn't have proper sound systems for what they were doing, uh, and they weren't really taken seriously as a live entity. Um, and so we got Owen, rest in peace, Owen, our original drummer. Uh, we knew him as a friend for a long time, and we got him to play drums alongside us because we wanted to go and play at festivals and be taken seriously as a live band. Because for us, playing live was a very important element of what we did. It was the end result of being creative in a studio, making a record, playing it live, and connecting with an audience. And we wanted to show people that the sort of music we were making had as much right to be up there on a big stage with a big sound system as any rock group. And that's why we went on the road and we supported groups like Living Colour, and it wasn't an easy tour. A lot of fans of Living Colour did not get it, and they didn't want to get it, right? So it was tricky, but it was very good for us because it taught us how to be strong when you're on the stage. Uh, so, I'm grateful for all of that. We've had a balance in life where we've seen all sides. We've seen crowds that go crazy for you, and we've seen crowds that just want to throw shit at you, you know. So, Anyway, that was really why we did it. Apart from the fact that it was great to have drums on stage as well as the turntables, it worked really well. But we wanted to take things a little bit further, and we'd already seen Stetsasonic do it. So it wasn't like we were the first people to do it. I mean, look at the Sugar Hill Gang and all the Sugar Hill records. They were live bands with the Furious Five rhyming and all of that. So it's always been part of the music.
I would like to ask you about the present situation, not only with the band, but also with the industry, with streaming services that are not paying literally anything. I mean, not you can't even call it that they're paying peanuts, because that's peanuts is too much of a value for what they're paying. And of course, with all that's happening with the AI at the moment in music, so I would like to the one thing that also struck me is that, for instance, I can't find your 33, 45, 78 album on streaming services, like your first album, that you can't find it on streaming services. So, but what is your opinion and the opinion of the band about the situation that all musicians around the world, especially independent musicians who doesn't have they deal with the major three labels? What is your personal opinion and feeling about what's going on in the industry at the moment?
I think it's a really weird time uh, in every sector of life. What we're seeing going on, we're being stripped of all of our rights. I don't really like to talk about authorship when it comes to music, because I kind of believe that music comes to you and it's not really something you own, but I kind of think because you're working hard, you deserve you deserve a little something from it, right? So you get to put your name on the record and you get to put that you wrote it, but I kind of think it's a gift. But what I definitely think is those people out there who are trying to take the ownership of it when they haven't written it, they definitely don't have any rights to it whatsoever. But that's what's happening. Like we've seen with We Transfer, saying that they can, do what they like with uploads, and it's like, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think they had to take that clause out, maybe. I'm not sure, but
Well, they have to, because that's breaching the rights, the copyrights and so on, because you've created something, whether it came from above or but
yeah,
just as you said, you have done some effort, you have wasted your time, you have wasted parts of your life in order to produce something that's a piece of art, and somebody just have the rights because you've sent it to another person, has the right to
yeah.
use your talents. It's ridiculous.
Doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it's like President Trump. It's just one thing after the next that you just go, you're kidding me, right? This guy is just lying, straight up lying. I'm looking at all the leaders in the world and I'm just going, they're lying.
All
They're
the
just
time.
lying. They're giving it that, but they're not doing anything,
Yeah.
right? Look, like with Gaza and stuff, it's like they're giving it all that this is terrible, but they're not doing anything.
Never in the history of modern democracy hasn't been so the difference between what people really want and what governments deliver hasn't been that much obvious
Yeah,
as it is now.
yeah, yeah.
Because people around the world want something entirely different from what the governments are at the moment delivering to them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm finding it very disturbing. And I'm finding it very disturbing that the prime ministers and people like that are looking so comfortable with it. I'm thinking, how can they be so comfortable knowing that all these people totally disagree with them? What do they know that we don't? How can they be comfortable with this? I'm disturbed because I think, what can we do? You know, we go out there on the street and demonstrate, and it's like they have no morals at all. And if we want to go back to Spotify, um, I am pretty concerned about that because I read that the guy who runs Spotify is investing in AI weaponry,
Yeah.
which I think is one dodgy area, right? And I just kind of think, do I really want to feel that anything that I may be contributing, however small it is going into being invested into that? I'm not feeling very comfortable with it, to be honest with you. I actually think Bandcamp's a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
I know it's probably I'm probably showing a lack of ambition or whatever, but at this point in my life, that's how I feel. I don't like what I see going on. I just think it's a worrying time, and I think we all have to get up out of our seats and take notice and and move on it because it's the money. If
Yeah.
you affect the money, then you'll change their mind, right? So if you kind of go, I ain't buying McDonald's, I ain't buying Starbucks, I ain't buying them
Absolutely.
soaps and all of that,
Yeah.
right? And Coca-Cola, you just go, I ain't buying it, right? And just shop at local stores and stuff like that. And it's tricky, it's like we're seeing things now that we didn't realize was going on under the carpet for many years. We're made to feel like we're inconsequential, like, we're powerless, right? But that is actually not the truth. Without us, they don't exist.